Welcome, Seeker. This is timeline 5 of our story. If you wish to start from the very beginning, you will find a link in the description. The choice to join Crawley on his journey to Boleskine House sent a thrill, cold and sharp, through your veins. The promise of direct communion with powerful unseen entities, of wielding the keys of Solomon, overshadowed any lingering fear. The previous night's Battle of Blythe Road had cemented your path with the beast, a path of audacious will and relentless pursuit of ultimate magical knowledge. Now the bustling, gaslit streets of London began to recede as you journeyed northward, a landscape gradually giving way to something far older, far more untamed. The train journey was long, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels, a monotonous counterpoint to the growing unease you felt as the Scottish Highlands began to unfurl before you. The verdant, rolling hills of the south gave way to stark, formidable mountains, their peaks often shrouded in a perpetual, brooding mist. The air grew colder, thinner, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant peat fires. The sky, even on what should have been clear days, often seemed bruised with shades of grey and purple, reflecting in the dark, still waters of isolated lochs. Small, ancient stone cottages huddled against the elements, their windows like vacant eyes watching your progress. There was a palpable sense of isolation here, of a land that held its secrets close, a place where the modern world felt like a flimsy veneer over an ancient primal heart. Every shadowed glen seemed to whisper forgotten tales, every lonely standing stone hinted at rituals long past. It was a land alive with history, and with something else, a pervasive, almost sentient quietude that seemed to hold its breath. Finally, after a long, winding carriage ride from the nearest station, the terrain grew wilder still. The road became little more than a dirt track, clinging precariously to the edge of a vast, inky expanse of water, Loch Ness. The famous loch stretched out endlessly, its surface often ruffled by an unseen current, creating ripples that looked like something vast moving beneath the depths. The air grew heavy, damp and eerily still, and then, through a break in the gnarled, wind-battered trees, you saw it. Boleskine House. It stood on a promontory overlooking the loch, a striking, historical building of grey stone, its walls dark and weathered, almost mournful in the fading light. Turrets and gables rose against the bruised sky, giving it the air of an ancient, brooding fortress. The isolation was absolute. There were no other dwellings within sight, just endless stretches of wilderness and the dark, impassive loch. It was clear, with a visceral certainty, why Crowley had chosen this place. It was secluded, far from the prying eyes of society, a natural stage for the esoteric. A raw, untamed energy seemed to emanate from the very ground upon which it stood. As you approached, a faint, almost imperceptible chill settled upon you. The house seemed to possess a personality, a history etched into its very stones. And then you saw it, a small, crumbling graveyard nestled just beyond a low stone wall, its ancient headstones leaning at drunken angles, shrouded by overgrown moss and shadowed trees. It was a place of forgotten names and settled dust, yet the air around it felt strangely agitated, as if the silence itself was a deception. Crowley, watching your gaze drift towards the cemetery, offered a grim smile. "Ah, the neighbors," he murmured, his voice cutting through the heavy silence. "A fitting reception committee, wouldn't you agree? This land, Seeker, it remembers. It remembers the rites of old, the sacrifices, the ancient pacts. And this house, it has seen its share of darkness even before my arrival." He led you into the house. Inside, it was cold. Despite the crackling fire in the massive hearth, the grand rooms felt hollow, echoing with unseen presences. Crowley, however, moved with an almost possessive familiarity, as if the very walls responded to his will. "This land," he began, his voice resonating in the cavernous drawing room, "has a rather colourful history. Before BOLESKINE House stood here, there was a kirk, a church, a place of worship for the local community. But its history was brutally cut short. According to local legend, during a congregation, the kirk tragically caught fire, consuming the building and killing everyone inside. It was a horrifying event, leaving behind only ashes and the lingering screams of the dying. Whether by fire or some other inexplicable tragedy, the kirk was irrevocably broken, its sanctity utterly shattered, its ground forever stained by the sudden mass death. And then came the man who built BOLESKINE House," Crowley continued, his eyes gleaming. "A certain Colonel Archibald Fraser. He was a scholar of the occult, a man not content with mere theory. He sought knowledge, raw and unvarnished. He discovered to his delight that a local necromancer had chosen this very spot for his grisly work, a place perfect for necromancy, where the veil between worlds is thinnest. This necromancer, it is said, would move bodies from the old churchyard, bringing them directly into his abode here, into the very foundations of the house, to perform his dark rites. He believed the raw essence of the recently deceased, coupled with the potent energies of the land and the nearby graveyard, created a perfect scene for communing with the dead. Imagine, Seeker, a house literally built upon desecrated ground, over the ashes of the deceased, a place where the boundary between life and death is blurred, where the very soil vibrates with the memory of whispered incantations and forced communions. Little wonder the locals avoid this area," Crowley chuckled, a dry, unsettling sound. "They speak of restless souls, the very ones who perished in that inferno, of shadows flitting in peripheral vision, of strange voices carried on the wind. They feel the weight of these many unrested entities, the lingering despair, the confusion, the raw energy of spirits trapped between worlds, bound by the dark acts performed here. For me," he said, spreading his hands, "this is not a curse, but a blessing, a natural nexus of power, a ready-made portal to the other side, a place where the fabric of reality is thin, easily manipulated, a perfect laboratory for the great work." You felt a surge of exhilaration, a giddy mix of fear and profound curiosity. Every hair on your arm stood on end, but your gaze remained fixed on Crowley, utterly captivated. This was the raw, unvarnished truth of magic, far removed from dusty texts and academic debates. "The ritual I intend to perform here," Crowley announced, leading you to a large, empty chamber in the basement, "is not for the faint of heart. It is the sacred operation from the Book of Abramelin the Mage, a 6-month endeavor, a meticulous, demanding process designed to achieve the ultimate goal, the knowledge and conversation of one's holy guardian angel. But to truly establish that connection, to clear the path, one must first confront and bind the elemental forces, the very 12 kings and dukes of hell." He gestured around the cold, bare room. "This chamber will be my sanctum, a magical arena. Every day, for months, there will be purifications, invocations, banishings, a relentless assault on the spiritual realms. I will starve the body to awaken the spirit, focus the will like a laser. The house itself will become an extension of my intent, a living battery for the forces I command." Crowley meticulously began his preparations. Days bled into weeks, then months. You assisted him, observing, learning, absorbing the rigorous discipline. He marked out a grand circle on the floor, inscribed with intricate sigils and divine names. Altars were set up, purified and adorned with specific incenses and offerings, meant to attract or compel the target entities. The very air in the house grew charged, crackling with an almost tangible energy. Crowley, gaunt but intensely focused, spent hours in silent meditation, his will a tangible force. He would perform daily invocations, his voice echoing through the house, sometimes a low hypnotic chant, other times a booming command that seemed to shake the very foundations. The subtle signs began to appear. Strange, fleeting shadows in peripheral vision, sudden inexplicable chills, faint, unidentifiable odors, and the distant, mournful cries that seemed to emanate from the lock itself, or perhaps from something within the house. Finally, the culmination of the 6-month working arrived. The night was a maelstrom of wind and rain, the lock outside a tumultuous black expanse. Inside the sanctum, the air throbbed with raw, unleashed power. Crowley, clad in ritual robes, stood within the grand circle, his eyes burning with an almost supernatural light. You stood at his side, trembling, yet utterly resolute. The fumes of exotic incense coiled into thick, undulating columns, forming vague, monstrous shapes in the flickering candlelight. Crowley raised his wand, his voice no longer human, but a resonant conduit for ancient, terrifying names. The ground vibrated, the very stones of Boleskine House, seeming to groan in protest. The air grew impossibly heavy, crushing, filled with the scent of ozone, and something indescribably foul, yet undeniably powerful. Then the shadows within the room intensified, coalescing into forms that defied earthly geometry. They did not speak, but from them emanated a chorus of disembodied voices, whispers and guttural cries that were not sounds, but direct impressions in your mind, a cacophony of ancient rage and cold intellect. The sand that Crowley had carefully laid around the ritual circle began to shift. Imperceptibly at first, then with increasing clarity, distinct footprints began to appear, pressing into the fine grains, as if colossal unseen beings were stepping through the barrier between worlds, their forms now present, pressing in. A crushing, suffocating darkness then consumed your senses, tearing at your perception of self. Your mind screamed, but no sound escaped your lips. Your vision blurred, the room twisting into an impossible vortex. You felt yourself falling, endlessly falling, into a bottomless pit, the abyss itself. You were no longer merely witnessing. You were part of the summoning, a conduit, a vessel. Your own body seized, rigid, then collapsed, as if your very essence was being drawn out, plummeting into that consuming void. Your eyes, wide with terror, rolled back in your head, then slowly, sickeningly, turned a solid, abyssal black, reflecting no light, only the infinite void. A guttural, inhuman sound tore from your throat, a language not of this world, ancient and chillingly resonant, a chorus of alien voices echoing through your own vocal cords. As you plummeted into that suffocating darkness, the entities seized upon your consciousness, wrenching open unseen pathways. The horrors were not heard, but imagined in the most visceral way, forced upon you as direct, brutal sensory implants. The future of Boleskine House unfurled in raw, unfiltered terror. Fires. You were in the infernos, feeling the searing heat as flames erupted inexplicably, consuming the property, tearing through the roof, charring the ancient stones. You experienced the recurring cycle of destruction, witnessing the very house become a sacrifice to the forces unleashed, their hunger for chaos insatiable. Strange deaths and tragedies, you became the victims. You felt the cold steel of a gun against a temple, the sickening thud of a body hitting the floor, the frantic, useless pleas of those consumed by dread and illness. You experienced the crushing weight of profound depression, the insidious onset of madness, the agony of inexplicable accidents. You saw caretakers, owners and visitors, their eyes wide with terror, their bodies found in bizarre, often gruesome circumstances, their very souls wrestled for control by unseen forces. You felt the chill of the loch's waters as a body was dragged from its depths, and the desperate, hopeless final moments of those who simply vanished. Hauntings and possessions. The house was no longer merely a dwelling, it was a living nightmare, and you were its captive. You were inside the chilling cold spots, heard the disembodied whispers as if they were your own thoughts, felt the unseen hands moving furniture, the insidious infiltration of shadows dancing in your peripheral vision. You were one of the individuals, eyes vacant, body racked by convulsions. Your mind no longer your own, a hollow shell inhabited by a malevolent presence, speaking in tongues you couldn't understand. An unfinished reckoning, a profound, cold realization settled within you. Crowley's own incomplete work, his abrupt departure, had allowed these entities to spread unchecked. Not just within the house, but subtly, insidiously, into the very fabric of the world, feeding chaos, empowering darkness, a never-ending echo of his unfinished ambition. The forces were unleashed, and they were unbound. The abyss consumed you, a vortex of despair and raw power. There was no returning to the cold stone floor of BOLESKINE House, no familiar room to stumble back into. Only the endless fall, the echoing horror, and the chilling knowledge that you were trapped in a dimension where these malevolent forces held sway. But then, amidst the screaming horrors of the abyss, a new thought, sharp and clear, cut through the chaos. You remembered Crowley's fervent descriptions of the Keys of Solomon, and more importantly, the lost Ring of Solomon. Its power, dominion over spirits, over elemental forces, over even the jinn. The ring that could bind and compel. A desperate, primal surge of will ignited within you. If this abyss was a prison of spirits, then the ring was its key. A faint, almost imperceptible hum resonated from somewhere within you. The pocket watch, your connection to your own reality, to your own time. This was not just a device for escape, it was a tool, a compass, a desperate chance for a different kind of salvation. You focused all your remaining energy, all your shattered consciousness, on the image of the ring, its legend, its power to control the very forces that now tormented you. You mentally clawed your way towards the concept of it, towards its fabled location beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, desperately trying to bend the timepiece's power not merely to return, but to seek the ultimate counter to this chaotic spiritual current. With a wrenching, agonizing lurch, a sensation far more violent than your initial time jump, you were torn from the abyss. You didn't land gently, you were simply gone, pulled by an irresistible force, by the powerful intention of your will, towards the heart of an ancient land. The scent of ozone, and the metallic tang of the abyss still clung to you, a phantom sensation. The images of BOLESKINE's dark future, the chilling whispers, the feeling of possession, they were seared into your mind, no longer external visions, but a profound, undeniable knowledge. You had escaped the abyss, but you carried its indelible mark. You had witnessed the ultimate power, the true consequences of tearing the veil. You had not just gained understanding, you had been granted a profound, terrifying awareness of the enduring ripple effects of such practices, a truth that permeated your very being. The pocket watch, now humming steadily in your hand, was more than a time machine. It was a tether to sanity, a lifeline that had pulled you back from an eternal torment, profoundly changed, bearing a wisdom purchased at an unimaginable cost, and now, it was guiding you towards a new, desperate quest. You were not back in your own time, nor were you truly free. You were hurtling towards ancient Jerusalem, drawn by the irresistible pull of the Ring of Solomon, a desperate hope to find the one artifact that could give you control, and perhaps, a means to truly return home. Click on the next video, and heed the silent call of the timepiece, for its resonant pulse will guide you toward your destiny, or perhaps the destiny of time itself waiting in the heart of ancient Jerusalem.